Dr. Morgan Hale sat quietly in Denver International Airport, Gate C-47, watching the winter sunlight stretch across the runway. The world outside looked peaceful, crisp skies, distant mountains, and the metallic hum of jet engines rising and fading like ocean waves. But inside her, calm was a practiced disguise. She'd spent years perfecting it. To everyone around her, she was a typical traveler. Mid to late 30s, neat charcoal suit, hair tied back, a worn leather satchel at her side. Her boarding pass read Hale, Morgan's seat 14A. She had no entourage, no urgency. If you looked at her for more than a moment, you might catch something in her stillness, not fear but control. A quiet, deliberate awareness of everything. Flight 217 to Washington, D.C. began boarding. The announcement echoed through the terminal, routine and forgettable. Morgan stood, smoothing her sleeve, and joined the slow-moving line. The couple ahead of her complained about delays. A businessman behind her was on a loud call about stock prices. She listened to none of it. Instead, her eyes flicked once toward the large windows, scanning. She always scanned. It was instinct. When she finally stepped onto the jet bridge, the recycled air hit her face. The metallic scent of aluminum and fuel mingled with coffee and perfume. She'd spent enough of her life around aircraft to recognize the subtle vibrations beneath her feet, the faint hum of hydraulic pressure building. The 737 waited, gleaming under the morning light, engines breathing slow and steady like an animal before takeoff. "Good morning," the flight attendant smiled, checking her ticket. 14A left side. Morgan smiled back. "Thank you." Her voice carried warmth but also distance, like a melody once familiar but now half forgotten. She slid into her window seat and placed her bag under the seat ahead. The window framed a clear view of the tarmac, where luggage carts moved in precise, practiced lines. She sipped her water and rested her head back. The sign chimed on. Outside, another plane lifted from the runway, streaking upward into a bright sky, and for a heartbeat, Morgan's eyes followed its climb. Her chest tightened slightly. She used to know what that felt like, that moment of freedom between gravity and control. For years, that sensation had defined her existence. Not as Dr. Morgan Hale, the civilian consultant she pretended to be, but as Major Hale, call sign Falcon 17, U.S. Air Force pilot, Special Operations Wing. But that woman was dead, officially at least. The memory came uninvited. The roar of engines in the Syrian desert, the flash of flares, the screaming alarms in her cockpit as she tried to pull a burning jet out of the night sky. Then silence. Then exile. 8 years of vanishing, a ghost wrapped in civilian life. A voice interrupted the thought. "Excuse me, ma'am, is this seat 14B?" A man in a gray hoodie smiled politely. She nodded, shifting to let him in. He was young, maybe mid-20s, military haircut, polite posture. She noticed it immediately, the subtle discipline in how he moved. He wasn't just a passenger either, she thought. But he didn't recognize her, and that was good. As the plane pushed back from the gate, the engine spooled up. The rumble beneath her feet steadied into a rhythmic vibration that she knew intimately. The sound always brought a strange comfort. Takeoff meant escape, even if temporary. The captain's voice came through the intercom. "Good morning, folks. This is your captain speaking. We're expecting a smooth flight today to Washington, D.C. Estimated time is 3 hours, 25 minutes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your flight." Morgan smiled faintly. Smooth flight. In her experience, those words rarely aged well. As the aircraft began its taxi, she glanced at her phone. A message blinked on the encrypted app only she could access, a small gray window with no sender name. One line of text. "Confirm arrival. Eyes may still be watching." She read it twice, then deleted it instantly. Her heart rate didn't rise, her breathing didn't change. The habits of discipline never left her. The plane accelerated, engines screaming, pressing her gently into the... Denver shrank beneath the clouds as they climbed eastward into open blue. Passengers murmured, laughed, adjusted earbuds. For them, this was just another flight. For her, it was the last step of a return she never planned to make. At cruising altitude, she closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come. She was listening to the engines, to the faint change in tone that most passengers never noticed. She was trained to hear trouble before anyone else. Somewhere below, NORAD radars were rotating across the continental grid. Somewhere, an algorithm would soon flag a transponder code linked to a name that should not exist anymore. And as the plane leveled off over Kansas airspace, the hum of the engines deepened. Morgan Hale exhaled softly, unaware that her past had just found her again. At 30,000 feet, 30 minutes into the flight, sunlight stretched across the cabin in pale gold streaks. Passengers adjusted their shades. Coffee cups clinked softly on tray tables. Everything felt calm, too calm, Morgan thought. She could tell when a plane was running perfectly. The hum of the engines, the rhythm of the stabilizers, it was a language only a pilot could hear. And right now, something sounded slightly off. She tilted her head toward the window. The horizon looked wrong, slightly south when they should have been maintaining a straight eastbound vector, subtle but clear. The plane was drifting. "Ladies and," the captain's voice broke in, cheerful and steady. "We've been asked to make a minor course adjustment due to traffic along our current route. Shouldn't affect our arrival time by much." A few passengers barely noticed. Some nodded, others went back to scrolling through their phones. Morgan didn't. She felt the subtle banking motion, too sharp for a commercial correction. Her instincts, buried but not dead, came alive. She leaned toward the young man beside her. "You travel often?" she asked casually. He glanced up from his tablet, surprised by her sudden interest. Yeah, work stuff." "Military?" she asked. Her tone was gentle but precise. He hesitated before nodding. "Air Force, logistics side." Morgan smiled faintly. "Figures." He chuckled. "You too." Her eyes met his briefly. "Once." That one word carried a weight he couldn't place. Before he could ask more, a small tremor ran through the cabin, turbulence maybe, but Morgan could tell it wasn't weather. It was directional correction, a deliberate control adjustment. The pilot was following an unexpected reroute. High above them, 800 miles away at North American Aerospace Defense Command NORAD, a radar operator frowned. A red blip flashed on his screen. A civilian 737 registered to Atlanticare, showing a deviation from Flight Plan D4731. Normally, it would trigger nothing more than a mild query. But this time, the system cross-referenced the aircraft's transponder ID. The code wasn't what it should have been. The digits matched an old frequency from the Air Combat Command, Echo 17H. The operator blinked. "That can't be right." He flagged the anomaly to his supervisor. Within seconds, 2 analysts confirmed it. That code had been retired 8 years ago, last associated with a classified call sign, Falcon 17. "Recheck the data," the supervisor ordered. "Maybe it's a software ghost." But the signal persisted, stable, consistent, locked. "Sir," the analyst whispered, "it's transmitting from Flight 217. The command room grew still. On the wall of screens, the civilian aircraft blinked red over the Midwest corridor. "Patch to Air Force Command," the supervisor ordered sharply. "We might have a code breach, possible hijack, or embedded transponder corruption." Within minutes, the incident rose through the chain of command. The Air Force's Rapid Response Protocol was initiated, code name Iron Watch. 2 F-22 Raptors were scrambled from Langley Air Force Base for visual intercept. Back aboard Flight 217, Morgan closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. She didn't know what had triggered the change, but deep down, she suspected something, or someone, had just recognized her existence. The intercom buzzed again. "Folks, this is your captain. We're getting a little reroute from air traffic control due to updated weather near the East Coast. Nothing to worry about." But Morgan could hear tension buried beneath the man's calm tone. Pilots always revealed more in the pauses between words than in the words themselves. She reached into her leather satchel and discreetly removed a small, black communication device, thin as a pen drive, matte finished, no visible branding. She powered it on under the cover of her coat. The screen flickered once, then displayed a message in cold blue letters. Echo 17H, active transmission detected. Her throat tightened. That code was hers, her call sign's encrypted frequency. Someone had found her. The young officer beside her noticed the faint light from her lap. "Everything okay?" he asked. She shut the device off and smiled faintly. "Just work emails." But her pulse was no longer calm. The jet hummed as it climbed slightly higher, engines pressing harder. Morgan looked out the window again. The sunlight had softened to a pale orange haze. Somewhere beyond that endless sky, she knew 2 fighter jets were already airborne, heading their way. In the NORAD operations room, one of the analysts spoke quietly. "Sir, if this is real, if that code really belongs to who we think it does." The supervisor didn't let him finish. "Then we're about to find out." He turned toward the comms officer. "Get Langley online. Have Talon Squadron intercept and identify. And for God's sake, keep this off civilian channels." Back in seat 14A, Morgan Hale rested her head against the window, her reflection calm and unbothered. But behind her steady eyes, calculations raced. She knew what the military would do next. She knew the intercept procedures, the timing, the distance. They'd send 2 Raptors fast, silent, invisible until they were already beside you. And when they saw her face, things would change forever. Inside NORAD's underground command center, a room filled with banked screens, blinking lights, and low hums of servers, the anomaly from Flight 217 set off a ripple of tension. Analysts sat frozen, staring at a civilian 737 that shouldn't have triggered any alarms. The transponder signal, Echo 17H, had not been used in over 8 years. Yet here it was, blinking steadily over Kansas, moving eastward like a ghost on radar. Lieutenant Monroe, a seasoned F-22 pilot, leaned over her station, eyes narrowing at the screen. "That code," she murmured under her breath, her voice tense. The analysts glanced at her, puzzled. Monroe's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up archived military data. The call sign was unmistakable. Falcon 17, her mentor, her former squadron leader, the woman who had vanished during the AL extraction mission, missing in action, declared KIA, and yet alive if the signal on the radar was real. Captain Beck, her wingman, came over, his expression tight. "What's wrong?" Monroe didn't answer immediately. She traced the flight path on her monitor, every bend, every correction. "This isn't just a civilian deviation," she said finally. "It's her. I know that transponder, I know that trajectory. That's Morgan Hale." Beck's jaw tightened. "You're saying she's alive after 8 years?" "I'm saying," Monroe's voice caught slightly, "that she's on that plane right now." The room fell into controlled chaos. Analysts whispered to each other, supervisors barked orders into secure lines, and the operations officer began coordinating an intercept. Within 10 minutes, 2 F-22 Raptors from Langley Air Force Base were airborne, Talon Squadron leading the scramble. Beck and Monroe strapped into their jets, helmets sealing them from the world below, engines humming with raw, supersonic power. Flight 217, the communications officer called over encrypted military channels. "You've been flagged for visual intercept by NORAD. Maintain current altitude and heading until identification is complete." Morgan, seated 14A, remained calm as she felt the subtle shift in altitude and speed. Her instincts, honed over thousands of hours in fighter jets, told her something was approaching fast, precise. The hum in the sky was different from turbulence. Her hand rested lightly on the black satchel at her feet, the encrypted module inside humming faintly. She didn't move. She didn't need to. Outside the cabin, high above the clouds, Beck and Monroe accelerated, their Raptors slicing through the crisp morning air. Monroe's visor reflected the civilian jet below. Her mind raced with memories of formation flights, emergency drills, of Hale's guidance and unwavering focus. Could this really be her, alive after all these years? And if so, why now? The F-22s closed in, careful to maintain a safe distance while preparing for visual identification. NORAD monitored every movement, every adjustment. Back in the command center, the supervisor's voice was sharp and precise. "We need confirmation. We can't risk civilian panic or protocol breach. You are to identify and report immediately. Do not engage unless instructed." Beck radioed Monroe, his voice steady. "Eyes on the target." "Visual," she replied, tension in her tone. "It's her, Falcon 17, alive." Beck exhaled sharply. "Copy that. Maintain escort. We're in uncharted territory." Morgan sensed them before they were officially visible, a faint blur against the sunlit clouds. Her eyes flicked to the window, and for the first time she allowed herself a small, knowing smile. "So it begins," she thought. "They've finally found me." Inside the cabin, passengers murmured at a faint shadow moving alongside the plane. The flight attendant's voice tried to reassure them. "Ladies, and just a routine escort. Nothing to worry about." Few believed her. Morgan remained calm, yet beneath the surface, calculations raced. She had studied intercept protocols for years. She knew exactly how NORAD would act, how the Raptors would position themselves, how pilots would attempt communication. She had anticipated this moment long before it arrived. As the Raptors flanked them, Monroe's voice crackled through secure channels. "Falcon 17, do you copy? This is Talon 2, U.S. Air Force. Please respond." Morgan's hand hovered over the encrypted device. She considered her reply, knowing the next words could shift everything. She glanced at the young officer sitting beside her, unaware of the storm above. Then she pressed the activation button, letting the familiar code speak. Her call sign lit up in the military system once more. Echo 17H. The past had just found her, and the world above Flight 217 would never be the same. The two F-22 Raptors sliced through the pale orange haze of skis, their shadows fleeting across the fields below. Lieutenant Monroe's eyes were locked on the 737 beneath her, her helmet HUD zooming in on every detail, fuselage markings, windows, flaps. Every indicator screamed civilian aircraft, yet something told her this was anything but ordinary. "Eyes sharp," Captain Beck said beside her, voice calm but tense. "Protocol standard. Identify, report, do not engage." Monroe swallowed, her fingers hovering near her radio controls. Then she saw it. A movement in the left window, subtle, deliberate. Someone was looking out, scanning the sky, aware of their presence before the first signal even reached the cockpit. She zoomed in further, bringing the figure into focus. Her heart skipped. Morgan Hale, alive. Right there, seated calmly in 14A, hair pulled back, expression serene but alert. The same eyes that had once trained her, guided her, and inspired her. The call sign Falcon 17 was alive, embodied in this woman's gaze. Monroe's throat tightened. She wanted to shout, to radio NORAD, to demand confirmation, but she held back. She whispered, barely audible, "It's her." Beck leaned closer to the HUD. He saw the figure and froze. "Wholly monitored protocol. That's Falcon 17, she's alive." "Confirmed," Monroe said, voice firm now, though her heart raced. "Visual ID. Major Morgan Hale, 8 years missing." Below, passengers shifted nervously. Most hadn't noticed the two fighter jets flanking the plane, but Morgan did. She allowed a faint smile to brush her lips. Took you long enough, she thought. She hadn't expected to be found so quickly, nor so accurately. NORAD was precise, lethal, and persistent, and yet she had prepared for this. Every contingency, every eventuality had been accounted for. She tapped a discreet button on her encrypted module. A faint hum resonated, invisible to the others on the plane. On Monroe's HUD, the code lit up. Echo 17H active transmission detected. The recognition system had confirmed her identity automatically. Monroe radioed NORAD. Her voice shook slightly despite her professionalism. "Command, this is Talon 2. Visual confirmation. Echo 17H, that is, Major Morgan Hale alive aboard Flight 217. Repeat, visual ID confirmed." Static crackled over the secure channel. "Copy that, Talon 2. Maintain position. Do not deviate from standard intercept procedures," came the calm, measured voice from NORAD command. Morgan's eyes followed the F-22s, calculating their speed, position, and altitude. She didn't flinch. She didn't panic. Instead, she considered the protocols in play. 2 Raptors in formation, standard intercept angle, no visible weapons deployed for now, perfect, just as it should be. Inside the cabin, the young officer next to her noticed her calm demeanor and the subtle change in her expression. "Everything all right?" he asked nervously. Morgan's lips curved in a controlled, almost imperceptible smile. "Yes, just company keeping watch," she replied. Her tone was casual, yet there was an edge of knowledge, a history behind the words the young man could not comprehend. Outside, Monroe's HUD zoomed again, bringing Morgan's face into sharper focus. Every line, every contour, every subtle expression screamed recognition and authority. Monroe's mind raced, recalling Hale's missions, her decisive maneuvers, the mentor who had vanished without warning. Now she was alive, and the implications were staggering. Beck and Monroe continued their escort, silent but tense. They knew the civilian passengers were oblivious to the magnitude of what was unfolding above them. But the pilots could feel it, the weight of history, the collapse of official records, the re-emergence of a woman who had been erased from the radar of both the military and the world. Morgan Hale, seated quietly, allowed herself a single thought. The past was no longer buried. The F-22s had found her. NORAD had found her. And the game had begun anew, one that she would navigate with precision, control, and calculated calm. Monroe exhaled slowly, fighting to maintain composure. "She's alive," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "We have to make sure she gets home safely, without alerting the wrong eyes." Morgan's eyes caught Monroe's reflection in the window, 2 fighter jets, 2 pilots, recognition dawning, connecting the past to the present. She smiled faintly, leaning back in her seat. It's time to see this through. Above the clouds, Flight 217 and the Raptors continued eastward, each movement deliberate, silent tension stretching across the sky. 8 years of history had converged into this single moment of recognition, and nothing would ever be the same again. Inside NORAD's command center, the air had shifted. What had started as a routine intercept had become something far more complicated. Analysts whispered urgently among themselves, cross-referencing the anomaly from Flight 217 with decades of archived records. The name Morgan Hale had been erased from official databases years ago, her status officially KIA. Now her call sign, Echo 17H, blinked alive on the radar, a ghost returning to the present. Major General, a veteran officer with decades of experience, strode into the operations room. His presence silenced the room instantly. "Explain," he demanded. The supervising analyst pointed to the screen. "Sir, we have a civilian 737 transmitting a retired Air Force code. Verification shows it belongs to, or once belonged to, Major Morgan Hale." A ripple of disbelief passed through the room, frowned, rubbing his chin. "Hale, that woman's been dead for 8 years. Our records are clear. Her mission's all off the books, classified. There's no way she's alive, let alone flying commercial." "Sir," one of the analysts whispered, almost afraid to speak, "the flight path is consistent with her last known tactical patterns. It's deliberate." His eyes narrowed. Deliberate meaning that she may be returning from a covert operation, unofficial, off-grid, the analyst answered. Upstairs, aboard Flight 217, Morgan Hale remained calm. The F-22s maintained formation, their engines silent but omnipresent. She sipped water quietly, letting the younger passengers adjust nervously to the sight of fighter jets flanking the plane. They had no idea of the storm swirling around them, a classified storm no one could explain. Her hand rested on the black encrypted module inside her bag. Within that small device were fragments of intelligence from missions so secret that only she and a handful of officials knew they existed. NORAD's discovery was not just unexpected, it was a complication. Exposure could jeopardize operations she had been protecting for nearly a decade. Back in the command center, General activated a secure channel. Contact Pentagon, Department of Defense, Joint Operations Command. No civilian channels. This stays internal. Understood. Yes, sir, the communications officer confirmed. Files previously marked top secret, destroy on recall were pulled from digital vaults. Screens lit up with decades-old mission reports, encrypted messages, and classified operation logs. Analysts worked feverishly, scanning for context. Every file, every operation connected back to her last mission in Syria, a covert extraction gone wrong. The logs detailed asset losses, failed communications, and Hale's sudden disappearance. Lieutenant Monroe's headset crackled. Command, we maintain visual. She's compliant but aware. No evasive maneuvers. The operations officer noted it, then muttered, of course she's aware. Hale wouldn't act any other way. That woman is methodical. In seat 14A, Morgan observed the subtle adjustments the F-22s were making. She recognized every maneuver, textbook intercept, perfect spacing, calculated approach. It was as though she could feel the minds behind the controls. She allowed a faint smile. They've trained well, she thought. Meanwhile, NORAD scrambled additional resources. Backup radar, satellite overlays, and intelligence liaisons were activated. A security perimeter was drawn around Air Force Base, where Flight 217 was scheduled to land. The facility, normally prepared for standard procedures, now braced for the arrival of a ghost, a pilot officially declared dead, now very much alive and carrying intelligence so sensitive it could compromise global operations. Analysts whispered of the impossibility. This doesn't happen, one muttered. Doesn't happen often, replied, but when it does, it's a nightmare for everyone. He gestured sharply. Keep visual confirmation, maintain escort, and do not, under any circumstances, allow civilian communication to reach her. NORAD does not negotiate. We contain. That is all. Morgan felt the subtle tension through the hum of the jet. She didn't flinch. She had anticipated this. Every twist, every surveillance procedure, every restricted communication channel, she had rehearsed it in her mind countless times over the years. The black module on her lap pulsed faintly, the encrypted data inside waiting for her to act. As Flight 217 continued eastward, the sun climbing higher, a quiet realization settled in the command center. They weren't just dealing with a missing pilot. They were dealing with Morgan Hale, alive, calculated, and uncontainable. And whatever happened next, the nation's airspace, and perhaps its secrets, would never be the same. 8 years ago, Morgan Hale had vanished from official records. A classified extraction mission in Syria had gone catastrophically wrong. The operation, known only to a handful of generals, involved recovering a civilian engineer who had developed critical components for the Air Force's next-generation AI defense network. Morgan, flying under the call sign Falcon 17, had been tasked with the extraction. But the asset never made it out. She had vanished to protect him, her disappearance carefully orchestrated to maintain plausible deniability. She remembered the desert night vividly. Engines screaming, flares igniting the sky, alarms shrieking inside the cockpit as she navigated a minefield of hostile territory. Every second had demanded precision. One mistake, one miscalculation, and the mission and her life would end. But she succeeded where others could not. And then, as the operation concluded in silence, she disappeared. Her death had been declared officially. For 8 years, Morgan had lived off-grid, moving through unlisted safe houses and working under aliases, completing clandestine missions too sensitive for government acknowledgement. She had recovered classified materials, protected assets, and neutralized threats quietly. The world believed her gone. Only a handful of people knew the truth, that she had never abandoned her country, only its public face. Now, returning from her latest covert operation, Morgan carried something small but powerful in her satchel, an encrypted module containing remnants of intelligence that could shift military strategies. This module represented years of silent work, piecing together threats and neutralizing them before they reached the public eye. She had been alone for so long, yet each mission had been meticulously documented and encoded for her eyes only until today. NORAD had just rediscovered her. The two F-22s flanking Flight 217 confirmed the military had recognized her call sign. Morgan exhaled softly, studying the pilots in their sleek cockpits, recognizing the same discipline she had once demanded of her own squadron. She had trained them to think fast, anticipate, and execute with precision. And now, the students were escorting the teacher, though neither of them yet understood the full story. The young officer seated beside her glanced nervously at the fighters outside. "Why are they here?" he asked. Morgan's gaze remained fixed on the sky. "Because some things never truly disappear," she said. Her voice was calm, measured, but beneath it lay decades of unspoken history. "And because some of us never stop working." NORAD was already scrambling backup plans, consulting satellite feeds and intelligence files. While in the control room, officers debated the legality and risk of allowing a civilian aircraft carrying classified material to proceed under escort. They didn't yet understand that Morgan had anticipated every possible scenario. The intercepts, the tracking, even the classified channels reopening around her existence. The F-22 pilots maintained formation, eyes trained on her aircraft, unaware of the silent calculations happening inside the cabin. Morgan had counted the distance, the speed, the angle of approach. Every movement they made had been anticipated. The sky above the Midwest became a stage for her return, one she had choreographed with decades of experience. She adjusted her bag slightly, ensuring the module's security. For 8 years, she had carried pieces of missions, pieces of secrets, pieces of herself. Now, returning to U.S. soil, she had to navigate the impossible, survive the scrutiny of the military that thought she was dead, ensure her mission remained protected, and emerge without exposing the operations that had defined her life for nearly a decade. As Flight 217 continued eastward, Morgan's thoughts were quiet but precise. Every decision mattered. Every second could change the outcome. NORAD might have detected her, but they didn't know the full story. The hidden mission was more than intelligence recovery. It was a testament to her skills, her perseverance, and her loyalty. And now, it was time for the world above the clouds to witness the truth of Falcon 17. Morgan Hale leaned back against the window, serene yet alert. The mission wasn't over. It had just entered its final phase, one in which she would finally return home, but on her own terms. And for the first time in 8 years, she allowed herself to imagine that the impossible might actually succeed. The sun had risen higher now, casting a sharp glare across the fuselage of Flight 217. Passengers murmured nervously as they noticed 2 sleek fighter jets flanking there. Phones emerged, cameras clicked, whispers filled the cabin. "Are those military jets?" one passenger asked, eyes wide. The flight attendant tried to reassure them. "Just a routine escort. Nothing to worry about, folks," she said, her voice calm but strained. But Morgan Hale remained perfectly composed. She didn't flinch. She had anticipated this exact moment for years, the intercept, the protocols, the reactions of both NORAD and the pilots above. She let the young officer next to her fidget, unaware of the silent tension coursing through the sky. Outside, Lieutenant Monroe and Captain Beck maintained formation, their supersonic Raptors cutting through the crisp air. The altitude was steady, the angle precise. Both pilots were skilled, but neither expected the weight of history hanging over them. Monroe's visor reflected the below, every detail of its fuselage, the passengers moving like ants, oblivious to the drama playing out above. And in seat 14A, Morgan Hale's calm gaze was fixed upward, unflinching, calculated. Monroe's hand hovered over the communication button. She hesitated, aware that any wrong word could escalate a situation no one was prepared to manage. Then her voice cut through the secure military channel. "Falcon 17, do you copy? This is Talon 2, U.S. Air Force. Please respond." Morgan's eyes flicked to the small black module on her lap. She activated it briefly, letting her call sign transmit through encrypted channels. The F-22 HUDs lit up. Echo 17H active transmission confirmed. Monroe's eyes widened. "She's responding. She knows we're here," she whispered. Beck gave a terse nod, keeping formation steady. Inside the cabin, the young officer noticed Morgan's faint smile. "What is it?" he asked, curiosity mingling with fear. "Just a friend from the skis," Morgan replied smoothly, her tone casual, but her mind raced through every possible scenario. Every move the pilots could make, every calculation, every protocol had been anticipated. For 8 years she had prepared for this moment. The F-22s flanked the plane, matching its speed, adjusting with millimeter precision. Passengers craned their necks, unsure whether to be awed or terrified. Morgan observed them carefully, gauging reactions. She allowed the display of force to unfold naturally. NORAD needed to assert control, but she retained full situational awareness. Every maneuver was predictable. Every action was a test she had already mastered. NORAD, watching the feeds from underground command, coordinated satellite imagery and radar overlays. "Maintain escort, do not deviate," the operations officer instructed. "We need her contained, visual confirmation only. No civilian panic, no engagement." Morgan adjusted her satchel slightly. The black encrypted module inside pulsed faintly, holding years of intelligence gathered and secured in secrecy. She would arrive safely, she decided, but on her own terms. She had orchestrated every step of this return, the flight, the intercept, even the pilots recognizing her call sign. Everything else would fall into place. Monroe, scanning her HUD again, noticed subtle patterns in Morgan's posture, in the minor adjustments she made in her seat, tiny movements that betrayed awareness of the Raptors' positions. "She's tracking us," Monroe murmured, astonished. Beck tightened his grip on the throttle. "That's impossible," he said. And yet it was true. Morgan Hale had not only survived, she had adapted. Years in the shadows had sharpened every instinct, every sense. She knew how to move, how to react, how to anticipate. As the aircraft passed over the rolling plains and into the stretch of mid-Atlantic sky, the tension in the cabin mirrored the tension above. Passengers whispered, pilots calculated, command watched, and Morgan Hale remained the eye of a storm that had been brewing for nearly a decade. The intercept was precise, calculated, and silent, a ballet of military coordination. And as Flight 217 continued eastward, Morgan allowed herself a single thought. The sky remembered her, and now she would guide the next chapter of this mission. For 8 years she had been a ghost. Now she was back, in command of every move, every risk, every outcome. And the world above the clouds had no idea what it had just witnessed. Air Force Base appeared below Flight 217, sprawling across the flat Virginia landscape like a city of steel and concrete. The commercial plane descended steadily, engines humming, flaps adjusting precisely. Passengers pressed their faces against the windows, anxious and fascinated at the escorting F-22s cutting through the sky above them. Cameras flashed, whispers filled the cabin, yet none could comprehend the storm of secrecy surrounding this landing. Morgan Hale, seated 14A, remained serene. The F-22s flanking the aircraft held perfect formation, their pilots alert, calculating, eyes locked on her movements. She studied them calmly, recognizing each tactical adjustment just as she had anticipated. Every protocol, every maneuver, every step of the intercept had been rehearsed in her mind for years. She allowed a faint smile. The past had finally caught up to her. NORAD monitored every move from underground. Screens displayed radar overlays, satellite feeds, and live cockpit visuals. Analysts whispered in awe and disbelief. A civilian aircraft carrying the pilot officially declared KIA, escorted under full military protocols. Major General observed silently, his jaw tight. Maintain security perimeter. No civilian interference. No leaks, he instructed. Every word was precise, measured, and unwavering. The operation teetered on the edge of public awareness and classified containment. Inside the cabin, passengers grew uneasy as the landing procedures commenced. The captain's calm voice tried to ease them. "Ladies, and please remain seated. We're landing under a special military escort. Nothing to worry about." A few glanced at the F-22s, awe and anxiety etched on their faces. The young officer beside Morgan fidgeted nervously. "Are they dangerous?" he asked. Morgan shook her head, her eyes scanning the sky. "Not unless they have to be," she replied quietly. Her voice was calm, controlled, carrying the weight of experience that spanned years of covert operations. The encrypted module in her satchel pulsed faintly, carrying intelligence collected over 8 years of silent missions, operations the world would never know existed. She adjusted her grip slightly, ensuring it remained secure. The plane touched down smoothly, rolling along the runway under precise escort guidance. Military vehicles formed a perimeter. Security personnel in plain clothes and uniforms moved strategically, scanning the aircraft. The F-22s peeled off slowly, breaking formation while maintaining visual contact until Flight 217 taxied to the secure hangar. The moment was tense, silent except for the hum of engines and the controlled chatter of command channels. Morgan rose, calm and composed, as the plane doors opened to agents waiting in tactical formation. Passengers were quietly ushered into a secure waiting area, unaware of the gravity of what had just occurred. Morgan's movements were deliberate, purposeful, and unhurried. She handed her boarding pass to the lead agent, who barely looked up before nodding. "Major Hale," the agent said softly, almost reverently, "welcome home." Morgan inclined her head, a faint, knowing smile crossing her face. 8 years had vanished, yet the weight of her past missions lingered in her posture, in her measured steps, in the quiet authority she radiated. She had returned not just as a passenger, but as a ghost of history, a living testament to missions erased from records but never forgotten. Outside, Beck and Monroe stood at the edge of the tarmac, their helmets removed, visors reflecting the morning light. They had escorted a legend through the sky, witnessed history unfold silently, and yet they knew their involvement was only a fragment of the truth. Morgan's calm composure suggested mastery, intelligence, and awareness far beyond what they had anticipated. They saluted discreetly, acknowledging a pilot who had not only survived but had returned on her own terms. Inside the secure command center, analysts exhaled. NORAD, the Pentagon, and Joint Operations Command recorded every detail, every transmission, every maneuver. And while the public would never hear of it, military history had quietly rewritten itself that morning. Falcon 17 had returned, alive, unbroken, and in full control of her fate. Morgan Hale walked away from the plane, carrying her satchel close. Behind her, the hum of jets faded, the screens in the command center dimmed, and the world outside continued unaware. She had survived, returned, and remained untouchable, a ghost who had finally come home, leaving silence as her signature. And in the skis above Air Force Base, the memory of Falcon 17 lingered, a shadow of skill, courage, and determination that no radar, no protocol, and no time could ever erase.